A young billionaire took his daughter to the park, and a little ragged girl shouted, "She's my twin sister." When he saw her, he almost fainted. The Sunday sun bathed the public park in Oakville with a golden light, turning the setting into a living canvas of children's laughter and dancing leaves. James Miller, at 32, watched his adopted daughter Emily, age 5, swinging happily, her blonde curls gleaming under the afternoon sun. Dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, nothing in his appearance suggested that he was the billionaire CEO of Miller Tech, one of the most innovative technology companies in the world. James smiled, lost in thought. Exactly 4.5 years ago, he had found Emily, then an abandoned baby, on the steps of his mansion. That moment changed his life forever. Now, watching the giggling little girl on the swing, he couldn't imagine life without her. "Hiya, Dad," Emily shouted, her small legs kicking the air in excitement. James laughed and pushed the swing harder, watching the pure joy on his daughter's face. The park was crowded that Sunday afternoon. Families were picnicking on the grass, couples strolled hand in hand, and children ran around chasing soap bubbles. It was a perfect day, the kind that would remain in memory as a golden recollection of happiness. James checked his watch. There was an hour left until the dinner he had promised Emily at her favorite Italian restaurant in the city center. He was about to call Emily to leave when something unexpected happened. A sharp cry sliced through the cheerful buzz of the park. "She's my twin sister!" James turned abruptly toward the sound, his heart skipping a beat. A few yards away, a girl around Emily's age, dressed in shabby clothes, was pointing frantically at the swing. Her wide eyes were fixed on Emily with an intensity that made James shudder. The world around James seemed to slow, almost to a stop. He looked at Emily, who had stopped swinging and was observing the scene with curiosity, then at the unknown girl, and back at Emily. The resemblance was impossible, unbelievable, shocking. Same face, same eyes, same expression of innocent curiosity. James felt his legs weaken. The blood seemed to drain from his body, leaving him cold and dizzy. He staggered, nearly falling, his vision blurring at the edges. "Dad?" Emily's worried voice sounded very far away. "Are you okay?" James blinked rapidly, forcing himself to focus. Emily was standing now, looking at him with concern. He turned his gaze back to where the unknown girl had been, but to his astonishment, she was gone. As if she had been swallowed by the earth, there was no sign of her anywhere. Where did she go?" James murmured, his eyes frantically scanning the crowd. "Who, Dad?" Emily asked, tugging on his shirt sleeve. "The girl who shouted." James nodded, still stunned. You saw her? Did you notice how she looked just like you?" Emily frowned, confused. "She looked like me. I didn't see her properly, Dad. She disappeared so quickly." James ran his hand through his hair, his heart still pounding. How could that girl have vanished so quickly? And more importantly, who was she? How did she know about Emily? And most crucially, could she really be his daughter's twin sister? "Emily," James said, kneeling so that he was at eye level with her, "we need to go home now. We have some things to talk about." Emily pouted. "But what about dinner at the Italian restaurant?" James forced a smile, trying to hide his agitation. "We can order in. How about that? We can have a picnic in the living room." Emily nodded enthusiastically, apparently forgetting the strange incident from moments before. But for James, that shout still echoed in his mind, bringing with it a whirlwind of questions and possibilities that threatened to turn his world upside down. As they walked out of the park, James cast one last look over his shoulder, half expecting to see the mysterious girl again. But she was gone, leaving only questions in her wake. One thing was certain: James would not rest until he discovered the truth. The mystery had only just begun, and James Miller, the man who built a tech empire from scratch, was about to embark on the most important investigation of his life, one that could redefine the meaning of family for him and for Emily. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park. One chapter of their lives had ended, and another, more mysterious and potentially wonderful, was about to begin. Night fell over the Miller mansion like a heavy cloak, bringing with it a silence that should have been comforting. But for James, every passing minute seemed to amplify the echo of that shout in the park. "She's my twin sister." James tossed and turned in his king-size bed, his gaze fixed on the ornate ceiling. The spacious bedroom, usually a haven of tranquility, now felt suffocating with unanswered questions. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that girl's face, a perfect copy of Emily, but with eyes that told a completely different story. At 3 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He rose silently, careful not to wake the household, and went down to his office. The soft lamplight illuminated the photo of Emily on his desk, a radiant smile. Bright eyes, golden hair blowing in the wind. James picked up the picture frame, his fingers tracing the outline of his daughter's face. "Who are you really, my little one?" he whispered to the photograph. His mind drifted back to that night 4.5 years ago, when he found Emily. It was a cold autumn night, and he was coming home late from work. The baby's crying took him by surprise, a fragile but insistent sound coming from the steps at the entrance of the mansion. There, wrapped in a cheap blanket, was Emily. Back then, James didn't hesitate. He brought the baby inside, called the authorities, and followed all the necessary legal procedures. But now, recalling every detail of that night, he wondered what he might have missed. Was there any clue about Emily's origin that he didn't notice? Any detail that could have revealed the existence of a twin sister? The hours passed, and James found himself immersed in a frantic search. He looked up cases of separated twins, adoption stories, anything that could shed light on his situation. But the more he read, the more questions arose. The rising sun took him by surprise, its first rays peeking through the curtains. James blinked, feeling the weight of a sleepless night. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee reached his nose. Rosa, the housekeeper, was already up, starting the day's routine. With a tired sigh, James stood. It was time to face the day and Emily's inevitable questions. In the sunny kitchen, Emily was already seated at the table, swinging her legs as Rosa made pancakes. Upon seeing James, the little girl's face lit up with a smile. "Good morning, Dad. You look tired. Did you have nightmares?" James forced a smile, sitting down beside her. "No, sweetheart. I just didn't sleep very well." Emily tilted her head, her blue eyes, so much like the girls from the park, fixed on him with curiosity. Was it because of that girl yesterday, the one who shouted in the park? James felt his heart race. He knew this question was coming, but he still wasn't prepared to answer it. "Yes, Emily, I'm a bit worried about her." "Why did she say she was my sister, Dad? Do I have a sister I didn't know about?" The innocence of the question hit James like a punch to the gut. How could he explain something he himself didn't understand? "Honey," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people get confused. Maybe that girl thought you looked like someone she knows." Emily frowned thoughtfully. "But she seemed pretty sure, Dad. And you acted really strange afterward." James swallowed hard. His daughter was sometimes too perceptive for her own good. "It's complicated, sweetheart. I'm trying to understand what happened." "Can we look for her?" Emily asked, her eyes shining with the idea of an adventure. "Maybe she needs help. She didn't have nice clothes like mine." Emily's innocent observation made James vividly recall the girl's ragged appearance in the park. His heart clenched. If that child really was Emily's sister, what sort of conditions was she living in? "We'll see, Emily," he answered softly. "First, we need to find out more about her." The rest of breakfast passed with Emily asking more questions. Some James could answer, others that left him silent, searching for words. Each innocent question was a reminder of how much he didn't know, how much he needed to discover. After dropping Emily off at school, James drove to his office at Miller Tech. but his mind was far from business. Instead of reviewing reports or attending meetings, he found himself researching adoption agencies, private investigators, anything that might help him unravel the mystery. By mid-afternoon, frustrated by the lack of progress, James decided to return to the park. It was a long shot, he knew, but maybe someone had seen something. Maybe there was some clue he had missed in the shock of the moment. The park was quieter that Monday. James walked over to the swings, retracing his steps from the previous day. He watched the children playing, each young face making his heart jump, wondering if he might see the mysterious girl again. That was when he noticed the elderly woman selling flowers near the main path. She had been there yesterday. He suddenly remembered. Maybe she had seen something. Approaching the woman, James bought a bouquet of daisies, Emily's favorites. "Excuse me," he began hesitantly, "but you were here yesterday afternoon, weren't you?" The woman smiled kindly. "Yes, sir. I'm here every day, rain or shine." James took a deep breath. "Then maybe you there was an incident yesterday, with a girl shouting about being the twin sister of another child. Do you remember that?" The woman's smile faltered momentarily. "Oh, yes, that poor little thing. She was so agitated." James's heart quickened. "Do you know her? Do you know who she is?" The woman slowly shook her head. "No, sir, I'd never seen her before yesterday, but—" She hesitated, looking around as if to ensure no one was listening. "She didn't seem well. Her clothes, you know, and those eyes, they'd seen things no child should see." James nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "Thank you," he murmured, clutching the bouquet of daisies. Returning to his car, James knew he was only at the beginning of a long and possibly painful journey. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't stop until he discovered the truth. For Emily, and for the mysterious girl who in some way had already found a place in his heart. Glancing at the daisies on the passenger seat, James made a silent promise. He would find the truth and do whatever it took to ensure both girls, Emily and the unknown child who might be her sister, got the life they deserved. With that renewed determination, James started the car. The mystery had only just begun, but he was ready to face it, no matter where it led. The days that followed the park incident dragged agonizingly slowly for James Miller. Each morning brought a fresh wave of hope, only to be replaced by frustration by nightfall. The park, once a place of joy and relaxation for him and Emily, had become the stage for his silent obsession. James established a new routine. Every morning after dropping Emily at school, he drove to the park. The route he used to take absent-mindedly was now traveled with almost painful attention. Every face on the street, every child holding a parent's hand, could be a clue, a connection to the mysterious girl who had upended his world. Arriving at the park, James always chose the same bench, strategically positioned with a view of most of the playground. His laptop open in front of him gave the impression that he was working, a ready excuse for any curious onlooker. But his restless, watchful eyes constantly scanned the area, looking for a glimpse of that blonde hair, that familiar yet unknown face. On the third day of his vigil, James noticed something he had previously overlooked. An elderly woman selling flowers. She was there every day, he realized, a constant in the ever-changing flow of park visitors. Her cart, filled with colorful bouquets, was like a beacon, attracting curious children and hurried adults. James watched her with growing interest. She interacted with customers with a gentle smile that never wavered, even when people passed by without buying. Her eyes, wrinkled yet sharp, seemed to take in everything around her. James made a mental note to speak with her soon. Someone so present and observant would surely have valuable information. As the days passed without any sign of the mysterious girl, James felt the weight of her absence growing in his chest. Every passing child was scrutinized. Every distant laugh made his heart jump. But whenever he looked more closely, it was just another unknown face. Another disappointment. As his search continued, James wrestled with conflicting thoughts about what this potential discovery could mean for his family. He loved Emily more than anything. She was the center of his world, the light that brightened his days. But if there was another child out there, equally deserving of his love and protection, how would he balance his responsibilities? And how would Emily react to the idea of a twin sister? These questions tormented him, chasing him even in his dreams. Night after night, he found himself in a mirror maze, chasing two identical Emilys. One laughed and ran into his arms, while the other cried alone, always just out of reach. He woke up sweating, heart pounding, an inexplicable sense of guilt weighing on him. By day, as he watched children playing in the park, James caught himself imagining ever more elaborate scenarios. How would the first meeting between Emily and her possible sister go? Would they recognize each other instantly? A genetic bond overcoming years of separation? Or would there be awkwardness, maybe even fear? And what about the girl's mother? James couldn't help wondering about the circumstances that led to the twins being separated. Poverty, illness, an impossible decision made in a moment of despair. He was certain there was a story of pain and hardship there. How would he approach the situation sensitively and fairly for everyone involved? On the 7th day of his vigil, James noticed something that deeply disturbed him. A group of older children were picking on a younger girl near the swings. For a moment, his heart sped up. Could it be her? But as he approached, he saw it wasn't the girl he was searching for. Even so, he couldn't ignore the situation. "Hey," he called, his voice firm but gentle. The older kids scattered quickly, leaving the smaller girl alone, tears in her eyes. James knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" The girl nodded shyly, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "Thank you, sir." "What's your name?" James asked softly. "Sophie," she replied in a near whisper. "Well, Sophie, those kids won't bother you anymore. But if it happens again, find an adult to help, okay?" Sophie nodded again, a small smile appearing on her face. "Okay. Thanks again." As he watched Sophie run back to a group of younger children, James felt a wave of emotion wash over him. How many other kids were out there in need of help? How many other Emilys and Sophies existed, alone and scared? That night, lying in bed, unable to sleep, James reflected on the incident with Sophie. His search for the mysterious girl had begun as something personal, a mission to complete his family. But now, he realized it could be something much bigger. After all, he was James Miller, CEO of one of the country's largest tech companies. He had resources, influence, and power. What was he doing with all that beyond amassing more wealth? Perhaps it was time to use his privileges for something more meaningful. An idea began taking shape in his mind. A foundation, perhaps. A program to help children in need, to ensure no Emily or Sophie was ever abandoned. He could use his company's technology to create support systems, to connect children in need with resources and opportunities. As the plan developed in his thoughts, James felt a new energy fill him. Yes, he would still find the mysterious girl. This was still central to him. But now there was a larger purpose, a broader vision of what he could accomplish. On the 10th day of his vigil at the park, James arrived with renewed determination. As always, his gaze swept across the playground, searching for a familiar face. But today, he also watched with new eyes, noticing children who looked lonely, those wearing clothes that were too worn, those who gazed enviously at other kids' snacks. And, just like every previous day, there was the flower seller lady arranging her colorful cart. James watched her for a moment, admiring the grace with which she interacted with each customer, the way her smile lit up children's faces as they stopped to admire the flowers. Making a sudden decision, James stood up from his usual bench. It was time to do more than just watch. It was time to act. With determined steps, he approached the flower cart. The lady looked up when he approached, a smile of recognition on her wrinkled face. "Good morning," James said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I think it's time we had a conversation." The lady tilted her head, her eyes shining with a wisdom that seemed to transcend age. "Ah, the worried father. I was wondering when you'd come to talk to me." James blinked and surprised. You knew I wanted to talk to you." She laughed softly. "My dear, I've been watching you watch this park for 10 days. Your eyes say more than you imagine." James felt his cheeks grow warm. Had he been that transparent? But maybe that transparency was a blessing. Perhaps this lady, with her keen eyes and gentle smile, had the answers he sought. I'm looking for someone," he began, his words hesitant. "A little girl. She appeared here 10 days ago, shouted something about being my daughter's twin sister, and then vanished." The flower lady studied him for a long moment, her gaze so penetrating it felt as though she could see right through him. "Some searches," she finally said, "lead us to places we never imagined. Are you prepared for where this one might take you, James Miller?" James swallowed hard, surprised she knew his name, but determined. "Yes," he replied, voice firm. "I'm ready for whatever it takes." The lady smiled, a smile that seemed filled with secrets and promises. "Then, my dear, you should sit down. We have a lot to discuss." And so, under the shade of an old tree, surrounded by the scent of fresh flowers and the distant sound of children playing, James Miller prepared to hear what the flower lady had to say. His heart pounded, a mixture of anxiety and hope. He knew somehow that what he was about to hear would change his life forever. The silent search had reached a turning point, and there was no turning back. James sat down next to the flower cart, his heart thudding against his ribs. The flower lady observed him with a penetrating look, as if she could see into his soul. For a moment, they were both silent, the hum of the park around them contrasting with the palpable tension between them. "So," the lady began, her voice soft but firm, "you want to know about the girl?" It wasn't a question, but James nodded anyway. "Yes, anything you can tell me. I need to find her." The lady sighed, her eyes drifting over the park before returning to James. "It's not so simple, you know. There are stories in this park that shouldn't be told lightly." James leaned forward, urgency clear in his voice. "Please, she could be important to my family. I need to know." The lady studied him for another moment, as if measuring his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, but remember, once you hear this, you cannot unhear it. Are you ready for the consequences?" "I am," James answered without hesitation. The flower lady began arranging a bouquet as she spoke, her skillful hands moving among the flowers with grace. "The girl you're looking for, I see her around here. Her name is Sarah." James's heart jumped. Sarah. Finally. A name for the face that haunted him. "She comes here often," the lady continued. "Always alone, always watching other children play, but never joining them." "Why?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The lady shrugged sadly. "Who can say? But her eyes... Oh, her eyes tell a story of loneliness and sorrow no child should know." James felt a knot tighten in his throat. The image of Sarah, lonely and sad, contrasted painfully with the happy memories of Emily. "You mentioned she has a difficult life," James pressed gently. The flower lady nodded, her eyes filling with deep sadness. "Yes, her clothes are always worn, sometimes dirty, and there are days when she looks so hungry it breaks my heart." James felt a wave of concern wash over him. The idea of a child lacking basic needs was heartbreaking. "What about her parents?" he asked, dreading the answer. "I've never seen them," the lady replied, shaking her head. "In all these months, Sarah has always been alone. Sometimes she mentions a mother, but I've never seen any adult with her." James frowned, his mind racing with possibilities. A single mother, perhaps, working long hours just to scrape by. "There's more," the lady continued, her voice dropping as though afraid of being overheard. "There were days when Sarah showed up, different." James's blood ran cold. "Different? How do you mean?" The flower lady hesitated, her eyes showing concern. "Sometimes she seems exhausted, like she hasn't slept. Other times, I noticed she walked carefully, as if she was in pain. James felt a mixture of alarm and resolve grow within him. Sarah's situation seemed more and more alarming. "Why didn't you call the authorities?" he asked, his voice tense. The lady sighed heavily. "Oh, young man, do you think I didn't consider that? But Sarah, she gets so scared when I mention adults, so fearful, and without solid proof." James understood the dilemma. Without clear evidence, calling the authorities could just scare Sarah away for good. "There's one more thing," the lady said, her voice now almost a whisper. "Something I noticed about Sarah." James leaned closer, eager to hear. "She always watches the families in the park," the lady revealed, "especially girls her age. It's like she's looking for something, or someone." James's heart almost stopped. Could it be that Sarah, in some way, knew or sensed she had a sister? "Where can I find her?" James asked, his voice trembling with contained emotion. The flower lady studied him for a long moment before answering. "She usually comes late in the afternoon when the park is quieter, but James—" She took his hand, her eyes serious. "Be careful. Sarah is like a frightened bird. One sudden move and she'll fly away, never to return." James nodded, understanding the gravity of the warning. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you for all you've told me." The lady smiled softly. "Don't thank me yet. The road ahead won't be easy. Are you ready for what you may discover?" James paused for a moment, thinking of Emily, of his comfortable life, of the happy family they were. Then he thought of Sarah, alone and possibly in danger. His resolve hardened. "I am," he answered firmly. "No matter what happens, I need to help Sarah. If she really is important to my family, well, that changes everything." The flower lady nodded, apparently satisfied with his response. "Then go, James Miller, and may you find what you're looking for." James stood, feeling both energized and overwhelmed. He had a name now, and some information. But the questions that tormented him had only multiplied. As he walked back to his car, James glanced over his shoulder one last time. The flower lady was already attending to another customer, her gentle smile back in place. But when their eyes briefly met, James saw in them a mix of hope and concern. Walking back to his car, James felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Finding Sarah was just the first step. What came next, how he could help her, how it would affect Emily, how he would navigate the complexities of this situation, was a mystery. But one thing was certain. James Miller would not rest until he ensured Sarah's safety and, if possible, understood her connection to his family. The road ahead was uncertain and likely difficult, but he was determined to travel it, no matter the cost. As he started the car, James made a silent promise to Sarah, wherever she might be. "I'll find you," he murmured, "and I'll do everything I can to help you." With that promise echoing in his mind, James drove away, leaving the park behind, but carrying with him a new purpose and an unshakable determination to change the fate of a girl he had yet to truly know, but who already held a special place in his heart. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Elm Grove, a neighborhood of modest homes and rundown buildings just a few miles from the park where James had spent the last several days. Following the vague directions from the flower lady, he now found himself in a completely different world. Gleaming downtown skyscrapers visible in the distance as a constant reminder of the gap between these two worlds. James slowed his luxury car, feeling uncomfortably conspicuous. Children played in the street, stopping to gape as he passed. Adults watched him from worn porches with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. His Italian suit and the immaculate shine of his vehicle screamed, "Outsider," in a place where every cent was counted carefully. Parking in front of a small corner grocery store, James took a deep breath before stepping out. The smell of fried food and uncollected trash hung in the air, so different from the aroma of freshly cut grass and flowers in the park, where he'd spent so much time lately. "Hey, mister," a young voice called. James turned to see a boy of about 10, wearing tattered clothes but sporting a bright smile. "You lost. People like you don't come around here much." James forced a smile, trying to appear less out of place than he felt. "Actually, I'm looking for someone. A girl named Sarah. Do you know her?" The boy's smile faded slightly. "Sarah? Lots of Sarahs around here." "Which one?" "She's about 5, is blonde hair," James began, but was interrupted by a gruff voice coming from the grocery store. "Bobby, stop bothering the gentleman and come help me in here." The boy shrugged apologetically and ran into the store, leaving James alone on the cracked sidewalk. Determined, James started walking down the street, his expensive shoes clicking on the uneven concrete. He stopped in front of a small playground where some children played on rusted equipment. A woman sitting on a nearby bench watched him warily. "Excuse me," James approached, trying to sound as friendly as possible. "I'm looking for a girl named Sarah. She's about 5, blonde hair." The woman frowned. "Why are you looking for her? Are you from social services?" James hesitated, realizing how his presence might raise suspicions. "No, I'm not from social services. I saw her in the Central Park and I'm worried about her. I want to help." The woman's expression softened slightly, but the distrust remained in her eyes. "Look, mister, folks around here take care of their own. If that's Sarah you're looking for lives around here, she's got people looking out for her." James nodded, understanding the community's protective instinct. "I understand. But if you see her, could you let her know someone wants to help her? No strings attached, no pressure." The woman studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. "I'll pass on the message, but I'm not promising anything." Thanking her, James continued walking through the neighborhood. With each step, he felt more and more out of his element. He passed narrow alleys where clothes hung from improvised lines blocked the little sunlight. He saw teenagers gathered on corners, casting suspicious looks his way. Entire families crowded into small apartments, living lives that would fit into the size of his living room. In a small square, James spotted a group of elderly ladies chatting animatedly. He decided to try again. "Excuse me, ladies," he approached, attempting to appear as non-threatening as possible. "I'm looking for a girl named Sarah. Blonde hair, about 5 years old." One of the ladies, grey-haired with a face lined by time, spoke up. "Oh yes, I think I know who you're talking about. The lonely little thing, right?" James's heart quickened. "Yes, that could be her. Do you see her often?" The lady shrugged. "Once in a while. She passes through here sometimes, always alone. She seems like a sad little thing, poor dear." "Do you know where she lives?" James asked, trying not to sound too eager. The ladies exchanged looks. "We're not sure," another replied, "but I think it's in one of those old buildings near the end of Oak Street. You know, the ones that look like they're about to collapse." James thanked them and headed in the direction indicated. Oak Street was even more run down than the others, with buildings that leaned precariously, their peeling facades telling stories of years of neglect. Walking slowly, scanning each window, every door, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sarah, James was approached by a middle-aged man. "Hey, you," the man called, his voice rough. "What are you doing here? Looking for trouble?" James raised his hands in a pacifying gesture. "No, sir, I'm just looking for someone, a girl named Sarah." The man narrowed his eyes. "Sarah? The little one who's always by herself?" "Yes," James exclaimed, hopeful. "Do you know her?" "I see her, sure. Know her." "That's another story," the man replied, scratching his scruffy chin. "She comes through here most days, always in a hurry, always looking over her shoulder like someone's after her." James's worry grew. "Have you ever seen where she goes?" The man pointed vaguely down the street. "Over that way, I think. But listen, friend, whatever you want with her, be careful. There's something off about the whole thing." James thanked him and kept walking, his heart heavy with all the information he'd gathered. Sarah was here, somewhere in this maze of narrow streets and decaying buildings. So close, yet so far. As the sun began to set, James realized he had to leave. He hadn't found Sarah, but now he had a better idea of where to look. More importantly, he'd seen firsthand the conditions she was likely living in. On his drive back to the gleaming, polished world he was used to, James felt a mix of frustration for not finding Sarah, gratitude for the privileged life he and Emily led, and a renewed determination to make a difference, not just for Sarah, but for all the children in this forgotten neighborhood. As he drove back toward the city's bright lights, James knew he would never see things the same way again. The contrast between the two worlds was painfully clear now, and he was more determined than ever to build a bridge between them. "I'll find you, Sarah," he murmured to himself, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "And when I do, I'll do everything I can to help. Not just you, but everyone here." With that silent promise, James left the mysterious neighborhood behind, knowing he would return soon. The search was far from over, and he was only beginning to grasp the true scope of the challenge before him. Dinner at the Miller mansion was usually a time of joy and lively conversation, with Emily enthusiastically sharing stories about her day at school, and James listening intently, grateful for that precious time with his daughter. But tonight, the atmosphere was different. A tense silence hovered over the table, broken only by the clink of silverware and James's occasional pensive sighs. Emily, ever observant, noticed the change in her father's behavior. Her big blue eyes studied him with a mixture of curiosity and concern as she idly poked at the food on her plate. "Dad," she finally broke the silence, her voice small but determined, "are you still thinking about that girl from the park?" James nearly choked on his wine, caught off guard by her direct question. He set his glass down, trying to buy time to formulate a response. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Emily shrugged, a surprisingly mature gesture for her 5 years. "You seem sad and distracted, like you were that day in the park after the girl shouted." James felt his heart tighten. Emily was often scarily good at reading his emotions. He wrestled internally, torn between wanting to be honest with his daughter and protecting her from a truth he barely understood himself. "Yes, Emily," he finally admitted, choosing his words carefully. "I'm thinking about her. I'm worried about her." Emily's eyes widened with interest. "Why? Is she sick?" James shook his head, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "No, not that I know of, but I think she might need help." Emily frowned, processing this information. "Is that why she said she was my sister, Dad? Because she needs help?" The question hit James like a punch to the stomach. How could he explain something so complex to a 5-year-old? How could he talk about the possibility of a twin sister without upending Emily's world? "Honey," he began, leaning forward to take Emily's small hand in his. "Sometimes people say things when they're confused or scared. We don't know why she said that, but I'm trying to find out." Emily nodded slowly, but James could see the gears turning in her inquisitive mind. "But she really looked a lot like us. She even had hair like mine." James felt a surge of panic. Emily had noticed the resemblance, of course. She was bright and observant. He needed to tread carefully now, very carefully. "Lots of people have blonde hair like yours, sweetheart," he said gently. "It doesn't necessarily mean they're related." Emily tilted her head, clearly not convinced. "But what if she really is my sister? Wouldn't it be cool to have a sister?" James felt his heart break a little at Emily's innocent enthusiasm. If only she knew the truth, that Sarah might be living in poverty, possibly in danger. "Emily," he said, his voice serious, "we shouldn't jump to conclusions. We don't know who that girl is or why she said what she did. It's important not to get our hopes up, okay?" Emily pouted, clearly disappointed by his evasive response. "But you're going to find her, right, Dad? To help her?" James felt a wave of love and pride at his daughter's compassion. "I'm trying, sweetheart, but it's complicated. There are a lot of things we need to consider." "Like what?" Emily pressed, her curiosity insatiable. James sighed, feeling the weight of complications he couldn't share with a 5-year-old. Legal questions, emotional implications, the possible impact on their lives. Well, he began, trying to simplify, we have to make sure we're doing the right thing. That we're not stepping in where we shouldn't, and we need to think about how this could affect our family. Emily was quiet for a moment, absorbing her father's words. Then, with the simple and direct logic of a child, she said, "But if she needs help, we should help her, right? That's what you always taught me." James felt a lump in his throat. Emily was right, of course. He had always taught her the importance of helping others, of using their privilege for good. And here he was, hesitating, torn between protecting his daughter and doing the right thing. "You're right, Emily," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll do what we can to help. But you have to understand it might be a long, complicated process, and in the end, things might not be exactly how we imagine." Emily nodded solemnly, looking older than her 5 years. "I understand, Dad. I just want her to be okay. And who knows, maybe we can be friends." James gave a sad smile, pulling Emily into a tight hug. "Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe." As he held his daughter, James felt the weight of his decisions more than ever. He was walking a fine line, trying to balance the truth, Emily's protection, and the need to help Sarah. Each step forward seemed to bring more questions, more complications. But looking at Emily, seeing her compassion and innocence, James knew he couldn't give up. For Emily, for Sarah, and for the man he wanted to be in his daughter's eyes, he had to keep going. "We'll figure this out together, okay?" he whispered, kissing the top of Emily's head. Emily nodded against his chest, and in that moment, despite all the uncertainties, James felt a renewed surge of determination. Whatever the outcome, he would face it with Emily by his side, guided by the love and compassion his daughter so naturally displayed. The path ahead was unclear, but with Emily as his moral compass, James knew he would find the right way, no matter how difficult the journey. As the days passed, James's determination to find Sarah grew in proportion to his frustration. Each new day brought renewed hope, only to end in disappointment. But James Miller was not a man who gave up easily. If he could build a tech empire from nothing, surely he could find one little girl in his own city. His first stop was Oakwood Elementary School, the one closest to the park where he'd first seen Sarah. Wearing his immaculate suit and charming smile, James managed to get a meeting with the principal, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Thompson. "Mr. Miller," she said, adjusting her glasses, "I understand your concern, but I can't just give out information about our students." James nodded sympathetically. "I completely understand, Mrs. Thompson. I'm not asking for names or addresses. I just want to know if you have a student who matches the description." The principal hesitated, clearly torn between professional duty and the desire to help. "Well, we do have several blonde 5-year-olds, but none that I know named Sarah, or who specifically match the situation you described." Disappointed, James thanked her and left his business card, asking that she contact him if she found anything. Leaving the school, he mentally noted to check other nearby schools in the coming weeks. His next stop was Sunnydale Park, a few miles away. Smaller and less frequented than the Central Park, James thought Sarah might come there to avoid crowds. He approached an ice cream vendor who seemed to know all the regular park-goers. "A little blonde girl, all alone." The man scratched his head, thinking, "Now that you mention it, I think I've seen a girl like that a few times. She always looked like she was in a hurry, you know, like she was running from something." James's heart raced. "Do you know where she went, or where she came from?" The vendor pointed vaguely to the east. "Over that way, I think. There are some housing projects in that direction." "It's a tough area." James thanked him, buying an ice cream he had no intention of eating, and headed east. The housing projects were a concrete jungle, grey buildings towering against the sky. He spent hours walking there, showing a photo of Emily, the resemblance was undeniable, and asking about Sarah. Some people nodded in recognition, others looked away, suspicious. An elderly man in a wheelchair at one building's entrance beckoned him over. "Hey you," he said, his voice rough. You looking for that lonely little girl, aren't you? James approached, hopeful. Yes, sir. Do you know her? The old man shrugged. I see her, sure. But know her? Not really. She comes by sometimes, always alone, always looking scared. But I've never seen her enter any of these buildings. Frustrated but grateful for the info, James thanked him and continued his search. Over the following days, he visited 3 more schools, 2 more parks, and countless neighborhoods. Everywhere the pattern repeated. People who had seen Sarah noted her loneliness and apparent fear, but no one who truly knew her or where she lived. James's frustration grew with every lead that led nowhere. How could a child be so visible and yet so invisible? Who was taking care of her? Why did no one seem to truly care? One night, after another fruitless day of searching, James found himself sitting in his home office, surrounded by maps of the city and scattered notes. He drew lines, marked points, trying to find a pattern in Sarah's sightings. Emily entered quietly, her small bare feet making almost no sound on the luxurious carpet. "Dad," she called softly. "Are you still looking for my sister?" James turned, surprised. He hadn't realized how late it was. "Emily, sweetheart, you should be in bed." She came closer, her curious eyes taking in the papers on the desk. "You are going to find her, right, Dad?" James pulled Emily onto his lap, feeling the weight of his promise. "I'm trying, my love. I'm trying really hard." Emily rested her head on his chest, her fingers fiddling absently with his tie. "You know, Dad, when I lose something, you always tell me to think about where I last saw it." James frowned, intrigued by his daughter's logic. "Yes." "Well," Emily continued, "you saw her last in our park, right? Maybe she'll come back there." James blinked, surprised by Emily's simple yet possibly brilliant suggestion. He had broadened his search so much that he might have neglected the most obvious place. "You're a genius. You know that," he said, kissing the top of Emily's head. She beamed, proud. "So we'll find her." James nodded, feeling renewed determination. "Yes, sweetheart, we will." As he carried Emily back to bed, James felt a mix of emotions. The frustration of the past few days was still there, but now there was a spark of hope. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe the answer lay where it all began. Lying in his own bed later, James made a silent promise. Tomorrow he would return to the Central Park. And this time, he wouldn't leave until he found Sarah or a solid lead on her whereabouts. The search had intensified, and James was more determined than ever to find the truth, no matter the cost. The late afternoon sun cast golden shadows across Oakville's Central Park, painting the scene in warm autumn hues. James Miller, seated on his usual bench, watched children play, his eyes constantly scanning the area for a familiar face. After weeks of fruitless searching, he had come back to the starting point, following Emily's simple yet wise suggestion. The fatigue of the search weighed on his shoulders, but the determination in his eyes remained unshaken. Each day that passed without finding Sarah was another day she might need help, and that pained him deeply. Then he saw her. At the far end of the park, near an old oak tree, stood a small, solitary figure, blonde hair shining in the setting sun, worn clothes, and a wary look that seemed out of place on someone so young. James's heart skipped a beat. "Sarah." He stood slowly, fearing any sudden movement might scare her away. Each step was calculated, his body tense with anticipation and the fear she might disappear again. When he was just a few yards away, Sarah noticed him. Her eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment, James feared she would run. But she remained still, seemingly frozen in place, her small fists clenched at her sides. "Hi," James said softly, stopping at a safe distance. "Do you remember me?" Sarah nodded hesitantly, her gaze never leaving his. "You're the dad of the girl on the swing," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. James smiled gently, relieved she remembered. "That's right. My name is James, and yours is Sarah, isn't it?" The girl seemed surprised that he knew her name, but she nodded again. Sarah, James continued, keeping his voice calm and gentle, I've been looking for you. I've been worried ever since that day. Sarah frowned, obvious confusion on her young face. Why? The simple, direct question caught James off guard. How could he explain the complexities of his situation to a child? Well, he began carefully, you seemed alone and maybe in need of help. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Sarah looked away, kicking a small rock with her worn sneaker. I'm fine, she mumbled, but her voice had a sadness that broke James's heart. Slowly, James crouched down to meet her eye level. Sarah, it's okay if you're not fine. Sometimes we need help, and there's no shame in that. Her eyes met his again, and for a moment, James saw the vulnerability behind her brave front. You really want to help? Yes, James answered, without hesitation. Very much. Sarah seemed to weigh this for a moment, her small face a mask of conflicting emotions. Finally, she spoke. Sometimes it's hard. Mom works a lot, and we don't always have enough to eat. James felt his heart constrict. The poverty he suspected was real, and hearing it confirmed by such a young voice was painful. I understand, he said softly. Where is your mom now, Sarah? She's collecting cardboard, Sarah answered, her voice low and slightly ashamed. James nodded sympathetically, struggling to maintain composure in the face of Sarah's harsh reality. Sarah, do you think you could take me to her? I'd really like to talk to your mum, see how I can help both of you. Sarah hesitated, biting her lower lip nervously. I don't know. Mom always says not to talk to strangers or bring them home. Your mum's right to say that, James agreed. It's very important to be careful, but I promise I only want to help. Maybe we can find your mum together. Sarah considered the proposal for a long moment, her eyes studying James intently, as though trying to determine if he could be trusted. Finally, she gave a small nod. Okay, but if Mom says you have to leave, you will, right? Absolutely, James promised, standing up slowly. I'll respect your Mom's wishes entirely. Sarah glanced at the sky, noticing the sun beginning to set. It's getting late. Mom should be on her way home now. She usually comes back around this time. James felt a mix of anxiety and hope. I see. Do you think we can go there, to where your mom works? Sarah hesitated again, then slowly nodded. Okay. It's in the neighborhood we live in, not too far from here. Thank you, Sarah, James said, his voice filled with gratitude. This means a lot to me. I promise I'll be respectful and careful. With one last hesitant glance, Sarah started walking, James following a short distance behind. They left the park and headed into the city streets, toward the neighborhood where Sarah and her mother lived. As they walked, James felt a swirl of emotions, relief at finally finding Sarah, anxiety about what lay ahead, and a profound sadness for the difficult life this little girl, so much like his Emily, was enduring. James knew that what was about to happen could change everything, for Sarah, for Emily, for himself. As they neared Sarah's neighborhood, he braced himself for what might be the most important encounter of his life, the one that would finally reveal the truth about Sarah, and potentially alter many lives forever. The sun was beginning to set as James and Sarah left the park, bathing the city in a golden twilight. The wide, well-maintained streets of downtown gradually gave way to narrower, more neglected roads as they approached Sarah's neighborhood. James watched the small figure ahead of him, noticing how Sarah navigated the streets with a familiarity that contrasted sharply with her fragile appearance. She glanced back at him occasionally, as though to confirm he was still there, her eyes a mix of caution and curiosity. Sarah, James said softly, breaking the silence between them. You remind me so much of my daughter, Emily. Sarah slowed her pace, allowing James to walk beside her. The girl on the swing, she asked, her voice a blend of interest and hesitation. James nodded, a gentle smile on his face. Yes, exactly. You two are the same age. Did you know? Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Really? And what's she like? James felt his heart tighten at the question. How to describe Emily without making Sarah feel left out or envious? He chose his words carefully. Well, she has blonde hair just like yours, he began, and the same bright blue eyes. Actually, when you showed up at the park that day, I was shocked by how much you looked alike. Sarah absorbed this quietly, her young face scrunched in concentration. Does she like playing at the park? She finally asked. James smiled. Oh, yes, she loves the swings, just like you seemed to that day. As they walked, James noted the changes in their surroundings. The buildings looked more worn, the sidewalks more cracked. Children played in the street using makeshift toys, watching the two strangers curiously. Where does Emily live? Sarah asked, her voice carrying a hint of anxiety. James hesitated, aware of the disparity between the girls' lives. We live in a big house near the city center, he answered honestly but carefully. Sarah nodded, her eyes drifting over the rundown buildings around them. Must be nice, she murmured, almost to herself. James felt his heart clench again. The contrast between Emily's world and Sarah's was painfully clear now. While his daughter enjoyed a spacious room full of toys, Sarah likely shared a cramped space with her mother. Sarah, James said gently, would you like to meet Emily someday? The girl stopped suddenly, turning to look at James with a mix of hope and fear. I can. Of course you can, James replied with an encouraging smile. I'm sure she'd love to meet you too. Sarah seemed to wrestle with a storm of emotions. But what if she doesn't like me? What if she thinks I'm different? James knelt down, meeting her eyes. Sarah, listen. Emily has a huge heart. She doesn't care about things like clothes or where someone lives. She just wants friends and to have fun. Isn't that what you want too? Sarah nodded slowly, a small smile forming on her lips. Continuing their walk, James looked at Sarah through new eyes. Despite her difficult circumstances, there was a resilience in her that impressed him. He wondered how it might have been if she and Emily had grown up together, as sisters. As they ventured deeper into Sarah's neighborhood, James's determination grew. Regardless of what he discovered, he was committed to helping this child. The stark contrast between Sarah and Emily's lives was a powerful reminder of the privileges his daughter enjoyed, and the responsibility that came with those privileges. Finally, Sarah pointed to a run-down building up ahead. That's where we live, she said, her voice a mix of pride and shame. James took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. They were about to turn a corner, both literally and figuratively. Whatever happened next, he knew his life and the lives of Sarah and Emily would never be the same. Are you ready? He asked Sarah gently. The girl looked at him, then at the building, then back at James. With a courage beyond her years, she nodded. I am. Together they turned the corner, prepared to face whatever fate had in store. James knew they were just steps away from discovering the truth, a truth that could change everything, and he was determined to face it, no matter how difficult it might be. Rounding the corner, James and Sarah came upon a scene that immediately captured the daily struggle faced by so many in that neighborhood. A thin woman, with disheveled blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, stood bent over a shopping cart filled with cardboard and other recyclables. Her gloved hands, torn and worn, worked tirelessly, sorting through her day's haul. "Mom!" Sarah called, her voice a mixture of relief and anxiety. The woman spun around abruptly, her eyes widening at the sight of her daughter accompanied by a well-dressed stranger. In an instant, her expression shifted from surprise to fear, and she dropped the cardboard she was holding, rushing towards Sarah. "Sarah, who is this man?" "What's going on?" she asked, pulling the girl close to her protectively. James stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Please don't be afraid. My name is James Miller. I think we need to talk." The woman, who James assumed was Jennifer, narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "About what? What do you want with my daughter?" Sarah, still clutched in her mother's arms, spoke softly. "Mum, he's the father of the girl on the swing, the one I told you about." Jennifer's eyes widened in recognition and, for a split second, James saw panic flash through her gaze. She knew exactly who he was and why he was there. "Mum," James began carefully, "I realize this must be scary and confusing, but I promise I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to understand the truth." Jennifer glanced around nervously, as though looking for an escape, but something in James's gentle expression made her pause. "Not here," she finally said, her voice trembling. Let's go to our apartment. This isn't something to discuss out in the open." James nodded, grateful for the opportunity. They walked in silence to a dilapidated building a few blocks away. The elevator was broken, so they climbed 4 flights of stairs to reach a small apartment. The contrast with James's mansion could not have been starker. The space was tiny, with a single bed against the wall, a small table with 2 chairs, and an improvised kitchen in the corner. The walls bore damp stains, and a musty smell hung in the air. Jennifer gestured for James to take one of the chairs as she sat in the other, pulling Sarah onto her lap. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the ticking of a cheap wall clock and the distant drone of traffic outside. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. "You know, don't you?" she asked in a near whisper. James nodded slowly. "I suspect, but I need to hear it from you. Please tell me the truth." Jennifer closed her eyes, hugging Sarah tighter. When she opened them again, they were filled with tears. "5 years ago," she began, her voice shaking, "I gave birth to identical twin girls." James's heart pounded. Though he already suspected, hearing the confirmation out loud felt surreal. Jennifer continued, words now spilling out as though a dam had broken. "I could barely support myself. I had no steady job, no family to help me. When I found out I was having twins and I panicked. How could I care for 2 babies? Tears flowed freely down Jennifer's face. Sarah watched her mother, confused and worried. "It was the hardest decision of my life," Jennifer sobbed. "I knew I couldn't give both of them the life they deserved. So I made a terrible choice. I decided one of them would have the chance at a better life." James felt a knot forming in his throat. He could see the pain in Jennifer's eyes, the guilt she had carried for years. "I did my research," she went on. "I looked for the wealthiest part of town, and one cold night, I wrapped one of the girls in a cheap blanket and left her on the steps of a mansion. I prayed she'd be found quickly, that she'd have a life I could never provide." James closed his eyes, recalling that night vividly. The crying that woke him, the surprise at opening the door to find a baby on his doorstep. "It was your mansion," Jennifer finished, locking eyes with James. "You found her, didn't you?" James nodded, momentarily unable to speak. When he finally did, his voice was hoarse with emotion. "Yes, I found her, and I adopted her. Her name is Emily now." Sarah, who had been silent until then, looked between her mother and James, her eyes wide with realization. "Mom, I have a sister." Jennifer clutched Sarah tightly, tears streaming. "Yes, my love, you have a twin sister. Forgive me for never telling you. I didn't know how." James watched, heartbroken by Jennifer's anguish and Sarah's confusion. He thought of Emily at home, unaware that her life was about to change forever. "Jennifer," James said softly, "I can't imagine how difficult that decision was, but you need to know that Emily has had a good life. She's loved, happy, healthy." Jennifer nodded through her tears. "Thank you. Knowing that helps a little, but it doesn't erase what I did." James leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. "What's done is done. We can't change the past, but we can decide what to do now. Emily deserves to know the truth. And Sarah deserves to know her sister." Sarah glanced at James, her eyes bright with a mix of fear and hope. "Can I really meet my sister?" "Of course you can, sweetheart," James replied with a kind smile. "In fact, I think it's time for this family to be reunited." Jennifer looked terrified at the idea. "But what if Emily hates us? What if she wants nothing to do with us?" James shook his head. "I know my daughter, she has a big heart. It will be a shock, of course, but I'm sure she'll want to meet you both." He paused, glancing around the small apartment. "And Jennifer, I want you to know I'm here to help. Not just to bring the girls together, but with anything else you might need." Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, but James held up a hand. "It's not charity. It's what's right. These girls are sisters. They deserve the chance to grow up together, to know each other." Silence settled in the tiny apartment as everyone absorbed the gravity of the moment. A family torn apart by desperate circumstances was on the verge of coming together. There would be challenges, intense emotions, painful questions, but looking at Sarah, seeing Emily's reflection in her hopeful eyes, James knew it would be worth it. This was only the beginning of a new journey, one of healing, reconciliation, and above all, love. "So," he said softly, "are you ready to meet Emily?" The sun had already set by the time James left Jennifer and Sarah's tiny apartment, his mind awash with emotions and thoughts. The day's revelations weighed heavily on his heart, and he couldn't shake the image of the stark contrast between Emily's life and that of her newly discovered twin sister. Driving back to his mansion, James couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and Jennifer, that cramped, run-down apartment, Jennifer's daily struggle to put food on the table, the childhood Sarah was missing out on. It all haunted him. How could he return to his world of luxury knowing that Emily's twin lived like that? When he arrived home, Emily was already asleep. He slipped quietly into her room, watching his daughter as she slumbered. The spacious bedroom, full of toys and comforts, felt almost obscene now, knowing the conditions Sarah lived in. That night, James barely slept. He spent hours in his office, doing research, making calculations, drafting plans. By sunrise, he had made a decision. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something about the future. After dropping Emily off at school, James drove back to Jennifer's neighborhood. The contrast between the two worlds seemed even starker in the daylight. He climbed the deteriorating steps of her building, his heart pounding in his chest. Jennifer answered the door, looking exhausted and apprehensive. Sarah peeked curiously from behind her. "Mr. Miller," Jennifer said, surprised. "I didn't expect you so soon." "Please, call me James," he replied with a gentle smile. "May I come in? There's something important I'd like to discuss with you." Jennifer hesitated for a moment before opening the door wider, allowing James inside. The small apartment seemed even smaller in the daylight. "Sarah, sweetie," Jennifer said, "why don't you go play in the hallway for a bit? I need to talk to Mr. James." Sarah nodded, casting a last curious glance at James before stepping out. Once alone, James got straight to the point. "Jennifer, I spent the night thinking about everything, about Sarah, about Emily, about you. And I've come to a conclusion. I cannot, in good conscience, let this situation continue as it is." Jennifer stiffened, her eyes filling with fear. You're not going to take Sarah away from me, are you?" "No," James exclaimed, realizing how his words might sound. "No, not at all. What I mean is, I can't let you and Sarah keep living in these conditions, not when I have the means to help." Jennifer relaxed slightly, though she still looked wary. "What do you mean?" James took a deep breath. "I want to propose a plan to improve your living situation and ensure Sarah and Emily can grow up close to each other, like sisters should." He then outlined the plan he'd formed overnight. He offered to rent a decent apartment for Jennifer and Sarah in a safe neighborhood near his own home. He proposed covering Sarah's education, giving her the same opportunities Emily had. Furthermore, he offered to help Jennifer find stable employment, possibly in his own company. "And for medical bills, food, clothing, everything will be covered," James concluded. "I want to make sure you and Sarah have a comfortable, secure life." Jennifer listened in silence, tears welling in her eyes. When James finished, she shook her head, looking stunned. It's very kind of you, James, but I can't accept all that. It's too much. We've managed on our own so far. We can keep... James gently interrupted. Jennifer, please think carefully. I'm not offering this out of pity or charity. I'm doing this because Sarah is Emily's sister. They're family, and family takes care of each other. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Besides, think of Sarah. She deserves the chance to know her sister, to have a happy, healthy childhood. And you deserve the peace of mind that comes from knowing your daughter is safe and cared for. Jennifer bit her lip, clearly torn. But what if it doesn't work out? What if Emily doesn't like us? Or if you change your mind? James smiled gently. Emily has a huge heart. I'm sure she'll love getting to know Sarah. And you. As for me changing my mind, we can draw up a legal agreement if that would make you feel more secure. But I promise, Jennifer, this is not a whim. It's a commitment I'm prepared to uphold for the long run. Jennifer remained silent for a long moment, tears quietly spilling down her cheeks. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. Why are you doing all this? James felt his own eyes grow misty. Because when I look at Sarah, I see Emily. I see the chance fate gave us to fix something that was torn apart so long ago. And because I believe every child deserves a fair shot at life. He paused, wiping away a tear. Besides, Jennifer, you made an incredibly difficult decision 5 years ago, motivated by love and the desire to give one of your girls a better life. Now we have the chance to give both girls that better life. Jennifer covered her face with her hands, silently sobbing. James waited patiently, giving her the time she needed to process everything. Finally, she lowered her hands, her eyes red but determined. Okay, she said softly. Okay, let's try. For Sarah, for Emily, for our family. James felt immense relief flood him. He extended his hand, which Jennifer took hesitantly. Thank you, Jennifer. I promise we'll make this work. At that moment, Sarah ran back into the apartment, her eyes bright with excitement. Mom, Mom, can I really meet my sister? Jennifer knelt, hugging Sarah tightly. Yes, my love. You'll meet your sister, and we'll have a new chance, a new life. James watched the scene with a mix of joy and apprehension. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be adjustments, challenges, possibly conflicts. But looking at Sarah, seeing Emily's reflection in her hopeful eyes, he knew he had made the right decision. This was more than just an important choice. It was the start of a new journey, one of healing, reconciliation, and above all, love. Well, James said, smiling at Sarah and Jennifer, how about we start looking for a new home for you? Sarah let out a delighted squeal, jumping up and down with excitement. Jennifer, still with tears in her eyes, managed a small smile. As they left the cramped apartment, James felt a renewed sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew the coming weeks and months would be full of changes and challenges. He would have to explain everything to Emily, help Jennifer and Sarah adapt to a new life, and navigate the emotional complexities of uniting two parts of a long-separated family. But as he watched Sarah holding her mother's hand while they walked down the stairs, James knew it would all be worth it. This was more than a major decision. It was the beginning of a new phase, one of healing, reconciliation, and above all, love. And as they got into his car, ready to start this new stage of their lives, James made a silent promise to himself, to Emily, to Sarah, and to Jennifer. He would do everything in his power to ensure this uniquely reunited family had every chance to thrive and be happy. Oakville's Central Park, the stage for so many significant events in recent months, was bathed in the golden light of an autumn afternoon. The multicolored leaves danced softly in the breeze, creating an almost magical setting for what was about to unfold. James arrived first, holding Emily's hand. The girl, usually chatty and full of energy, was unusually quiet. Her big blue eyes scanned the park nervously, searching for a face she knew would be identical to her own. "Dad," Emily said, her voice small and hesitant. "What if she doesn't like me?" James knelt, meeting her eyes. "Emily, sweetheart, Sarah is going to love you. You're sisters, remember? You have a special bond." Emily nodded, but James could see the mix of emotions in her eyes: excitement, fear, curiosity, all swirling in a storm he could barely imagine. Not far away, Jennifer was walking toward the park, Sarah clinging tightly to her hand. The girl, who usually seemed so confident in her own neighborhood, now looked small and vulnerable. "Mom," Sarah whispered, "what if she's really different from me? What if we don't have anything in common?" Jennifer stopped, crouching to look in her daughter's eyes. "Sarah, my love, you two are more alike than you think. And even if you're different in some ways, that only makes your relationship more special. Remember, she's your sister." Sarah took a deep breath, summoning courage, and they continued walking. James spotted Jennifer and Sarah first. His heart gave a leap seeing them approach. He gently called Emily's attention. "Look, sweetheart, there they are." Emily turned, her eyes widening when she saw Sarah. It was like looking in a mirror, but a mirror that showed a slightly different version of herself. The same blonde hair, the same blue eyes, the same face shape. But Sarah was thinner, her skin a bit more tanned, her clothes simpler. The two families approached each other slowly, as if afraid to break the magic of the moment. When they were only a few steps away, they stopped. For a long moment, no one spoke. Emily and Sarah stared at each other, taking in every detail. It was as though the rest of the world had vanished, leaving only the two of them in their own bubble of reality. Emily finally broke the silence. "Hi," she said softly, a small, shy smile tugging at her lips. "I'm Emily." Sarah returned the shy smile. "Hi, I'm Sarah." Another moment of silence followed, both girls still studying each other. Then, almost in unison, they each took a step forward. "Do you like swings?" Emily asked, her voice a bit more confident now. Sarah's face lit up. "I love swings." "Me too," Emily exclaimed, her excitement growing. "Want to go play?" Sarah glanced at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, sweetheart, have fun." The two girls ran toward the swings, leaving James and Jennifer behind, both watching with a swirl of emotions. "They seem to be getting along well," Jennifer commented, her voice trembling with emotion. James nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes, they do." On the swings, Emily and Sarah chatted excitedly as they soared higher and higher. "What's your favorite color?" Emily asked. "Blue," Sarah replied. "What about you?" "Purple," Emily said, laughing. "But blue is my second favorite." The questions and answers flowed easily between them, as they discovered both similarities and differences. Both loved strawberry ice cream, though Sarah preferred tag while Emily liked hide and seek. They both loved drawing, but Emily enjoyed sketching animals while Sarah preferred landscapes. James and Jennifer sat on a nearby bench, watching the girls interact. "It's amazing," Jennifer murmured. "It's like they've always known each other." James smiled, feeling a surge of emotion. "I think, in a way, they always have, even without knowing it." After some time on the swings, the girls decided to explore the rest of the park. They climbed together up the slide, coming down squealing with delight. Then they headed to the sandbox, where they started building an elaborate sandcastle. "Look, Mom," Sarah shouted, pointing to the tower she and Emily had built. "We made a castle," Jennifer smiled, waving to them. "It's beautiful, sweeties." Emily then pulled Sarah by the hand. "Come on, let's make flower necklaces." They ran over to a patch of grass where they picked daisies and dandelions. Sitting on the ground, they wove the flowers into colorful necklaces for each other. James watched, amazed at how effortlessly the girls had bonded. It was as though the universe was correcting a mistake, bringing together two halves of a whole that should never have been separated. "They're so alike," he remarked to Jennifer. "Not just in looks, but in their gestures, the way they laugh." Jennifer nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes, It's like they're making up for lost time. As the afternoon wore on, Emily and Sarah's connection only seemed to deepen. They shared secrets, laughed at jokes only they understood, and at times appeared to communicate with just a look. At one point, Emily asked, "Sarah, have you ever felt like something was missing, even if you didn't know what?" Sarah nodded solemnly. "Yes, a lot, especially when I saw other kids with their siblings." Emily smiled, taking Sarah's hand. "Well, now it's not missing anymore, right?" Sarah smiled back, squeezing Emily's hand. "No, now it's complete." James and Jennifer exchanged emotional glances, both feeling the magnitude and beauty of the moment. When the sun began to set, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, James and Jennifer called the girls over. "It's getting late, sweeties," Jennifer said gently. "We need to go." The girls looked at each other, a flash of panic crossing their faces. "But we'll see each other again, won't we?" Emily asked anxiously. James knelt down, smiling at both of them. "Of course, in fact, we have a surprise for you two." Sarah and Emily drew closer, curious. "Sarah," Jennifer began, "remember I told you we were moving?" Sarah nodded. "Well," James continued, "you're going to be living very close by, so you'll be able to see each other whenever you want." The girls' faces lit up with matching radiant smiles. "Really?" they asked in unison, causing the adults to burst into laughter. "Really," Jennifer confirmed, "we're going to be neighbors." Emily and Sarah hugged each other, jumping for joy. The scene warmed James and Jennifer's hearts, a visible testament to the unbreakable bond between the sisters. As they prepared to leave, the girls exchanged one more tight hug. "See you tomorrow, sister," Emily said, her voice filled with affection. "See you tomorrow, sister," Sarah echoed, her eyes shining with happiness. James and Jennifer watched the scene with a mix of joy and emotion. The day had surpassed their most optimistic expectations. Not only had the girls gotten along, but they seemed to have formed an immediate, profound connection. As they walked back to their respective cars, James reflected on the journey that had led them here. From that fateful day in the park, when Sarah shouted she was Emily's sister, to this moment of family union, it had been a roller coaster of emotions and revelations. Looking at Emily, who was still excitedly waving goodbye to Sarah, James felt a wave of gratitude. Gratitude for the destiny that had reunited this family, gratitude for Jennifer's resilience, for Sarah's sweetness, and for Emily's open, loving heart. Jennifer, for her part, felt as though a massive burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The guilt she'd carried for so long was beginning to lift, replaced by a renewed hope for the future. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, two families left the park. Not as strangers brought together by extraordinary circumstances, but as a single family, united by love and by the unbreakable bond between two sisters who had finally found each other. The sisters' reunion wasn't just a moment of coming together, but the beginning of a new journey. A journey of discovery, of growing together, of making up for lost time. And as Emily and Sarah drifted off to sleep in their respective beds that night, both dreaming of their new sister and the adventures they'd share, James and Jennifer knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as the family they now were. The future was full of possibilities, shared laughter, whispered secrets, joined hands, kumwas, and united hearts. The sisters' reunion was not an end, but a beginning, the start of a story of love, forgiveness, and family unity that would continue to unfold in the years to come. The weeks following that day in the park were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for the newly reunited family. True to his word, James had found a spacious, comfortable apartment for Jennifer and Sarah, only a few blocks from his own mansion. Moving day arrived on a bright, sunny Saturday morning. James parked the moving truck in front of the old building where Jennifer and Sarah lived, feeling a mix of emotions as he saw the few boxes and worn furniture that comprised their belongings. Emily, eager to help, ran up to the apartment, carrying a box almost bigger than she was. "Sarah, where do you want me to put this?" Sarah, carefully wrapping the few dishes they owned, smiled at the sight of her sister. "Over in that corner is good, Emily." "Thanks." Jennifer watched the scene with tearful eyes, still barely believing how drastically her life had turned around. James approached her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Jennifer nodded, wiping away a tear. "Yes, it's a lot to process. A few weeks ago, I could barely pay the rent here, and now—" James smiled sympathetically. "I know it's a big change, but you both deserve it, Jennifer." "Sarah deserves it." The move took most of the day, with the girls helping in their own way, often causing more chaos than assistance, but filling the air with laughter and lively chatter. When they finally arrived at the new apartment, the difference was night and day. It was spacious, well-lit, and furnished with new items James had insisted on purchasing. A world away from Jennifer and Sarah's old home. Sarah ran from room to room, her eyes wide with amazement. "Mom, I have my own bedroom, and look, there's a desk for me to do my homework." Jennifer followed her, equally awestruck. "It's beautiful, isn't it, sweetheart? We'll have to thank James a lot." Emily grabbed Sarah's hand. "Come on, let's organize your room. We can hang pictures on the wall just like in my room." The girls rushed off to Sarah's new bedroom, already making plans for decoration. James approached Jennifer, who watched the girls with a tearful smile. "So, what do you think?" "It's perfect, James," Jennifer replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you for all this." James shook his head. "So you don't have to thank me. We're family now, remember? That's what families do." In the days and weeks that followed, a new family dynamic began to form. The girls alternated between the two homes, spending some days with James and others with Jennifer. It was an adjustment for everyone, but one that brought more joy than challenges. Emily, used to being an only child, sometimes found it hard to share James's attention. There were moments of jealousy and small arguments between the sisters, but James and Jennifer worked together to help them navigate those feelings. "Remember," James often said, "you're sisters. The love we have for you doesn't diminish when shared. It grows." Sarah, meanwhile, sometimes felt intimidated by Emily's luxurious life. One afternoon, after a shopping trip where Emily got several new toys, Sarah grew quiet and withdrawn. Jennifer found her sitting alone in her bedroom. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sarah hesitated before replying. "Mom, why couldn't we have things like that before?" Jennifer's heart ached. She sat beside her daughter, pulling her into a hug. "Oh, Sarah, I know it's hard to understand, but what matters now is we have a chance for a better life. And remember, the most valuable things aren't what we buy, but the love we share." For James and Jennifer, co-parenting brought its own challenges. They had different parenting styles, shaped by their distinct life experiences. Jennifer tended to be more protective, while James encouraged independence. "I don't think Sarah should walk to school by herself," Jennifer argued one evening. "It's dangerous," James sighed. "Jennifer, I get your concern, but the neighborhood is safe, and the school is nearby. It's important for her self-confidence." They learned to compromise, always putting the girls' well-being first. As the months passed, the family found its rhythm. The girls thrived, both at school and at home. With better educational resources, Sarah discovered a talent for math. Emily, inspired by Sarah's creativity, developed a love for art. James watched in wonder as the girls complemented each other. Where Emily was outgoing and impulsive, Sarah was calm and reflective. Together, they were a formidable pair, always ready for new adventures. Jennifer, with James's help, found a job at a local non-profit that supported families in need. Her first-hand knowledge of poverty and struggle made her a valuable and compassionate employee. As the twins' birthday approached, James and Jennifer decided to throw a big celebration. It would be the first time the girls celebrated together, and they wanted it to be special. The big day arrived on a beautiful spring afternoon. The garden of James's mansion had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with colorful balloons, a makeshift dance floor, and a table of treats that made kids and grown-ups drool. Emily and Sarah, dressed in matching but not identical dresses, a deliberate choice to celebrate their individuality, ran around greeting guests with radiant smiles. James took in the scene with a full heart. He saw Sarah proudly introducing her mom to her new school friends. He saw Emily showing Jennifer her newest magic trick. He saw the two girls, one so alike yet so distinct, dancing together, laughing and twirling under the afternoon sun. Jennifer came over, handing James a glass of lemonade. Amazing, isn't it? A year ago, I wouldn't have dreamed this was possible. James nodded, feeling a surge of emotion. It's more than I could have hoped for. Look at them, Jennifer. They're so happy. The moment arrived to sing Happy Birthday. The girls stood side by side in front of a huge cake, their faces glowing with candlelight. As everyone sang, James noticed the girls' hands were entwined, an unconscious gesture of unity and support. "Make a wish," someone shouted when the song ended. Emily and Sarah looked at each other, smiled, and blew out the candles together. The crowd cheered, and James noticed Jennifer discreetly wiping away a tear. Later, when the party was winding down and the girls were exhausted but happy, James gathered everyone for a picture. Emily and Sarah in the center, James on one side, Jennifer on the other, all smiling broadly. As the photographer prepared, James looked at his newly formed family. At Emily, his daughter by choice and love, whose unexpected arrival had forever changed his life. At Sarah, the brave little girl who had faced adversity and was now flourishing. At Jennifer, a mother who had done the unthinkable out of love and now had a second chance. "All set?" the photographer asked. "All set," James replied, his voice thick with emotion. The flash went off, capturing that moment of happiness and unity forever. A family the fates had separated and love had brought together again. That night, after all the guests had left and the girls were asleep, Sarah in Emily's room, both curled up together like puppies, James and Jennifer sat on the veranda, gazing at the stars. "You know," James said softly, "when I found Emily that night 6 years ago, I thought my life had changed forever, and it had, but I had no idea that was just the beginning of something even bigger." Jennifer nodded, her eyes shimmering with unfallen tears. "I spent so long regretting that decision, James, so many nights awake, wondering if I did the right thing. And now I see that somehow everything happened as it should." James took Jennifer's hand, squeezing it gently. "The past brought us here, but it's the future that matters now. A future we'll build together for our girls." Jennifer smiled, returning the squeeze. "For our girls," she echoed. As the night deepened and a new day approached, James and Jennifer remained there, united by the extraordinary journey they'd taken and the promise of what was yet to come. Upstairs, Emily and Sarah slept peacefully, their dreams filled with shared adventures and sisterly love. It was, truly, a new beginning, a story of family that was only just being written, brimming with possibilities, challenges, and above all, love. A love that transcended blood, overcame adversity, and promised a bright future for them all. And so, under the starry sky of Oakville, a family once torn apart by fate and reunited by love rested, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Together,